Tonight, you will sleep on the ground, in the dark, with your eyes closed, and it will not once occur to you that this is a thing your ancestors could not do. Right now, you can end the darkness with one finger. You reach out, touch a switch, and the night simply disappears from the room. For our first few million years, the dark was where we got eaten. You do it without a thought a dozen times a day, and the dark obeys instantly. It has probably never occurred to you that this is a kind of miracle, that you hold, in the tip of one finger, a power your ancestors would have wept to possess. Because for almost the entire existence of our lineage, when the sun went down, there was nothing you could do about it. The dark came, and you were inside it, and you stayed inside it until the sun decided to return. There was no switch. There was no flame. And in that darkness, the world became something it is not for you. A place actively trying to kill you, full of things that could see you when you could not see them. We tend to imagine the time before fire as a brief, primitive prologue, a short chapter before humans got clever. It was the opposite. Our ancestors go back millions of years, through early Homo more than 2 million years ago and the Australopithecines before them, and the control of fire, depending on which evidence you accept, arrived somewhere between roughly 1 million and 400,000 years ago. Do that arithmetic and the truth lands hard. For the overwhelming majority of the time there have been creatures on the human line, there was no fire at all. Living without it was not the exception. It was the entire default condition of being almost human, for a span of time so long it is difficult to hold in the mind. So the real question is not when we got fire, it is how anything on our branch of the family survived the immense darkness before it. And the answer begins with a fact about your own body. You are a daytime animal. Human beings are built, from the eyes inward, for a world of light. Our color vision is superb in daylight and nearly useless in the dark. We have no reflective layer behind the eye, the tupitum lucidum, that makes a cat's or a wolf's eyes shine and lets them see in near total blackness. We cannot smell a predator from across a valley. We cannot hear a paw settle onto soil 40 feet away. In daylight, with our sharp eyes and our upright stance scanning the horizon, early humans could hold their own. But when the light drained out of the sky, all of those advantages drained with it. And the animals that owned the night, the ones whose senses were built for exactly this, came awake. This is not speculation. The bones tell the story with a bluntness that is hard to sit with. At a South African cave called Swart Krans, researchers recovered a skull fragment from a young member of an early human relative, Puranthropus robustus, dating to somewhere between roughly 1.5 and 1 million years ago. In the back of that skull are 2 neat puncture holes. For years they were a puzzle, until someone matched them to the lower canine teeth of a leopard jaw found in the very same deposit. The teeth fit the holes exactly. This child had been seized by the head, its skull punched through by a leopard's fangs, and dragged, most likely up into a tree, the way leopards still haul their kills today, the leftovers dropping into the cave below to fossilize. The South African scientist C.K. Brain built an entire framework around findings like this, and its conclusion overturned a flattering myth. Early humans were not the fearsome hunters of the prehistoric world. For much of our deep past, we were prey. The same story is written on an even more famous fossil. The Taung Child, a 3-year-old of the species Australopithecus africanus, who died over 2 million years ago, was found with strange puncture marks and tears in the base of its eye sockets. The paleoanthropologist Lee Berger identified the killer, a crowned eagle, a bird that still hunts monkeys in Africa today, ripping out the eyes to reach the brain. A child of our lineage snatched from the ground by a bird and eaten in its nest. This was the world without fire. A world in which a leopard could take you by the skull in the dark, in which an eagle could drop out of the sky and carry off your children. And the defense, for millions of years, was the same one our primate cousins still use. When night fell, you got up off the ground and you climbed. You slept in the trees, above the reach of the cats, wedged into branches, sleeping lightly, waking at every sound. The night was not for rest in any sense you would recognize. It was a siege. Every single night, for millions of years, our ancestors climbed into the dark and waited to see if they would still be alive at dawn. And then, slowly, something changed. The earliest evidence is contested, and honesty demands we treat it that way. But at Wonderwerk Cave in South Africa, recent analysis of burnt bone has pushed possible fire use back to more than 1 million years ago, perhaps as far as 1.75 million, associated with Homo erectus. And here is the crucial, humbling detail the researchers stress. These early humans were almost certainly not making fire. They were capturing it. When lightning or a wildfire lit the landscape, they seized a burning branch and carried it home, and kept it alive as long as they possibly could. The earliest human relationship with fire was not mastery, it was custody. A borrowed, fragile, flickering thing that had to be fed and sheltered, and never, ever allowed to die. Because once it went out, you could not simply make another. You had to wait for the sky to give you fire again. By around 800,000 years ago, at Gesher Beichnot Yaakov in Israel, the evidence sharpens into something unmistakable: clustered hearths, burnt flint, the charred remains of cooked food, fire used in specific spots, again and again. And by roughly 400,000 years ago, fire becomes habitual across many human sites, a normal and expected part of life. The long custody was becoming control. And with that control, everything about the fireless world inverted. The switch had been thrown, and it stayed thrown. The night, which had belonged to the predators for millions of years, suddenly had a border the predators would not cross, a ring of light and heat and smoke that a leopard's ancient instincts told it to avoid. For the first time, humans could come down out of the trees and sleep on the ground, together, around the flame. The siege was lifted. We took the night. But here is where the story turns into something stranger than mere protection. Because fire did not just guard the human body, it reached inside it and rebuilt it. The Harvard biological anthropologist Richard Wrangham has spent his career on a single, startling argument: that cooking made us human, not as a metaphor, but literally, physically. His starting point is a fact almost no one notices. Humans, alone among all animals, cannot survive in the wild on raw food. We are the only species that has lost the ability to live on what nature provides uncooked. Wrangham studied the raw food diet in modern people who have every advantage: blenders, supplements, year-round grocery stores, and found that even so, they lose weight, and a large fraction of women on strict raw diets stop menstruating entirely, their bodies deciding there is not enough energy to sustain fertility. In the wild, with only what you could gather, a raw diet would not merely be unpleasant, it would be a slow death sentence. Cooking, Wrangham showed, is a kind of pre-digestion done outside the body. Heat gelatinizes the starch in tubers and denatures the protein in meat, unlocking energy that raw food locks away. A cooked egg is over 90% digestible, where a raw one is barely half. Cooking meant that for the first time, a human could extract enough calories from a day's food without spending the entire day chewing, the way a gorilla must. And that surplus of energy went somewhere specific. As our ancestors began eating cooked food, their guts shrank. A smaller digestive system was all a cooked diet required, and the enormous energy those guts had consumed was freed to fuel the single most expensive organ a body can grow: the brain. The teeth got smaller, the jaw got weaker, the gut contracted, and the brain ballooned into the outsized, ravenous, world-conquering organ you are using to read this sentence. Which means the human without fire is not simply a colder, more frightened version of you. It is a different kind of creature altogether. One with bigger teeth, a larger gut, a smaller brain, sleeping in a tree. Fire did not just help us survive. It remade our anatomy so completely that we can never go back. We became, in Wrangham's framing, biologically dependent on a technology. Take fire away now, and we cannot simply return to the old way of living, because the body that lived the old way no longer exists. We burned that bridge, quite literally, and grew a brain on the far side of it. Charles Darwin called the control of fire probably the greatest discovery, excepting language, ever made by man. He may have understated it. Language changed what we could say to each other. Fire changed what we physically were. And so the honest answer to how ancient humans survived without fire is heavy with a kind of grief. For millions of years, they survived it barely, as prey, climbing into the branches each night, losing their children to leopards and eagles, chewing raw food through half their waking hours, locked out of the darkness that covered half of existence. They survived it the way any hunted animal survives, by vigilance and luck and numbers, paying a toll in the dark that we will never fully count. The dark itself has not changed at all. It still falls every evening, exactly as it did before there was a single flame on Earth to answer it. The predators are mostly gone now, and the fear that remains, that flicker of unease when the lights go out, the near-universal terror of the dark that every human child feels and no one has to be taught, is a fossil, a memory older than our species, of a time when the setting of the sun was the most dangerous moment of the day, and there was nothing to do but climb and wait and hope to see the morning. You end all of that with one finger on a switch. We just forgot that the dark was ever something we were afraid of.